After losing billions of dollars, Obina returned to his village with nothing but a small travel bag and a broken heart. The successful billionaire who once owned companies' luxury cars and a mansion in Lagos suddenly found himself struggling to survive. The same people who once praised him now laughed at him. His fiancée abandoned him. His friends disappeared. The villagers mocked him daily as he wandered into the forest to hunt for food and sell bushmeat at the local market. To everyone around him, Obina was a finished man, a failure, a man whose best days were behind him. But while the entire village laughed, one person refused to join them, a poor orphan girl named Amaka. She had no wealth, no powerful family, no influence. Yet she saw something nobody else could see. She saw the man behind the failure. As their friendship grew, so did the hatred and mockery from the villagers. People laughed when they sat together. People laughed when they fell in love. And people laughed even harder when the former billionaire married the poor orphan. "Look at them," the villagers said. "A failed billionaire and a poor orphan. They truly belong together." But what nobody knew was that destiny was quietly preparing a miracle. Years later, those same villagers who mocked Obina would stand frozen in disbelief. The same people who called him a failure would desperately seek his attention. And the same orphan girl they laughed at would become the woman standing beside him as he rebuilt everything he had lost. Before we continue this incredible story, take a moment to subscribe to the channel. Like this video. Trust me, you'll want to stay until the very end of this one. Because what happened to Obina and Amaka will prove that sometimes losing everything is the first step toward finding the life you were truly meant to live. Now let's begin. At 30 years old, Obina Okafor had everything most people could only dream about. He was one of the youngest billionaires in Nigeria. His face appeared regularly in business magazines. Television stations invited him for interviews. Young entrepreneurs quoted his speeches on social media. People admired him. People respected him. Some even envied him. From the top floor of his glass skyscraper in Lagos, Obina could see almost the entire city. Every morning he stood beside the large window of his office sipping coffee while watching the busy streets below. To him, Lagos represented success, and success was something he had worked hard to achieve. Unlike many wealthy men who inherited fortunes from their families, Obina had built his empire from nothing. After graduating from university, he started a small technology company with only one computer and a rented office. The early years were difficult. There were days when he barely had enough money to pay his employees. There were nights when he slept inside the office because he could not afford transportation home. But he refused to quit. Slowly his company grew. One business became two. Two became five. Before long he owned technology firms, real estate companies, and logistics businesses spread across the country. His wealth increased rapidly. Soon he was worth billions. But despite all his success, there was one person who mattered most to him, his fiancée Chioma. Chioma was beautiful, intelligent, and elegant. They had met 3 years earlier during a charity event. From the moment Obina saw her, he knew she was special. Their relationship moved quickly. Within a year, they were engaged. The wedding was already being planned. It was expected to be one of the biggest celebrity weddings in the country. Everything seemed perfect. At least that was what Obina believed. What he did not know was that danger was already growing within his own company. And the person responsible was someone he trusted completely, his business partner Chaik. For nearly 8 years, Chaik had worked beside him. They had started several projects together. Obina treated him like a brother. He trusted him with financial records, company accounts, and major business decisions. Because of that trust, Obina never suspected that Chaik was secretly stealing from him. Month after month, Chaik transferred money into hidden accounts. He forged signatures. He manipulated documents. He created fake investments and fake expenses. Each transaction was carefully hidden. The fraud continued for years without Obina noticing. Then one morning, everything changed. Obina arrived at his office, as usual. His secretary rushed toward him. Immediately, her face was pale. "Sir, we have a problem." Obina frowned. "What happened?" "The investors are here." "Okay." "They are demanding answers." Obina felt a strange feeling in his stomach. "What answers?" "They say millions of dollars are missing." His heartbeat quickened. What the secretary swallowed nervously. "The board members are waiting inside the conference room." Obina walked quickly toward the room. The moment he entered, he knew something was terribly wrong. Several investors sat around the large table. Some looked angry. Others looked shocked. A thick stack of financial documents lay in front of them. One elderly investor stood immediately. "Obina, explain this." He pushed the documents across the table. Obina picked them up. As he scanned through the pages, confusion filled his face. The numbers made no sense. Massive amounts of money had disappeared. Millions, then tens of millions, then hundreds of millions. It was impossible. "These figures are wrong," Obina said. "They are not wrong," another investor replied coldly. "The audit confirms everything." Obina shook his head. "No, there must be a mistake." But there was no mistake. Within days, investigators uncovered the truth. The missing funds were real. The forged documents were real. The financial damage was enormous. And because many of the transactions carried Obina's forged signature, authorities initially believed he was responsible. News spread rapidly. Television stations covered the scandal. Newspapers published front-page headlines. Social media exploded with speculation. The businessman who had inspired millions was suddenly being accused of fraud. Investors panicked. Business partners withdrew. Banks demanded repayment of loans. The company's stock value collapsed. Employees feared for their jobs. Obina's entire world began falling apart. Meanwhile, Chaik had vanished. No one could find him. His phones were switched off. His house was empty. He had disappeared without a trace. By the time investigators finally proved Obina was innocent, the damage had already been done. His reputation was shattered. His businesses were drowning in debt. His investors had lost confidence. Banks began seizing company assets. Properties were auctioned. Luxury vehicles were repossessed. One after another, the pieces of his empire disappeared. For the first time in his adult life, Obina felt helpless. Weeks later, he sat alone inside his mansion. The house that once felt alive now felt empty. Many of his staff had already left. The phones barely rang anymore. The friends who used to visit frequently had vanished. Silence filled every room. Obina stared at a framed photograph of himself and Chioma. Their wedding date was only a few months away. At least he still had her, or so he thought. That evening, Chioma arrived. The moment she entered, Obina noticed something unusual. She looked distant, cold, uncomfortable. He forced a smile. "Chioma." She nodded slightly. "Hello." He walked toward her. "I know things have been difficult lately, but everything will be okay." She looked away. Obina felt nervous. "What's wrong?" Chioma remained silent. "Talk to me." Finally, she sighed. "Obina, we need to discuss our future." His heart tightened. "Our future?" "Yes." He sat down slowly. Something about her voice frightened him. "What do you mean?" Chioma folded her arms. "I don't think this relationship can continue." For a moment, Obina thought he had heard her incorrectly. What I want to end the engagement. The words hit him like a physical blow. What are you talking about? She avoided his eyes. This isn't the life I planned. Obina stared at her, in disbelief. You're leaving me because I lost money. It's not just about money. Then what is it? She hesitated. Then she finally spoke. I can't marry a man whose future is uncertain. The room became silent. Obina felt his chest tighten painfully. After everything they had shared, after all their promises, after all their plans, this was her answer. You said you loved me. Chioma looked away. I did. Then stay. She shook her head. I can't. Tears filled Obina's eyes. Not because of the lost businesses, not because of the seized properties, not because of the billions that had disappeared, but because the woman he intended to spend the rest of his life with was abandoning him when he needed her most. She placed her engagement ring on the table. Then she stood. I'm sorry. Without another word, she walked toward the door. Obina remained frozen. The sound of the door closing echoed through the empty mansion. And just like that, she was gone. The following weeks became the darkest period of his life. The mansion was eventually seized. His luxury cars disappeared. His companies collapsed completely. The media moved on to other stories. People who once praised him now mocked him. The mighty billionaire had fallen. One rainy evening, Obina sat alone in a small rented apartment. He stared at the city lights through the window. Lagos no longer felt like home. Every street reminded him of failure. Every building reminded him of what he had lost. For hours, he sat in silence. Then a thought entered his mind. The village, the place where he was born, the place he had not visited in years. Perhaps it was time to leave. Perhaps it was time to start over. Not as a billionaire, not as a celebrity businessman, just as Obina. The next morning, he packed his few remaining belongings into a single travel bag. There was no convoy, no security guards, no luxury vehicles, no assistants, no reporters, just one broken man carrying a bag. As the bus pulled away from Lagos, Obina looked out the window one last time. The city that had given him everything had taken everything away. He had no idea what awaited him in the village. He had no money, no company, no fiancé, no reputation, nothing. But unknown to him, fate was preparing a new chapter, a chapter that would bring him something far more valuable than wealth. And her name was Amaka. The journey from Lagos to Obina's village took several hours. As the old bus bounced along the rough road, Obina sat quietly by the window staring at the passing scenery. Green fields stretched across the countryside. Palm trees swayed gently in the wind. Villages appeared and disappeared along the roadside. Everything felt familiar, yet everything felt different. The last time Obina had traveled this road, he had been a billionaire. His convoy had consisted of 3 luxury SUVs. Security guards had accompanied him everywhere. Villagers had lined the streets to welcome him. Children had run after his vehicles, shouting his name. Now he sat alone on a worn-out bus seat carrying a single travel bag. Life had changed dramatically. As the bus approached the village, a strange feeling settled in his chest. Fear. Not fear of poverty, not fear of hardship, but fear of facing people who knew him, people who had once admired him, people who had celebrated his success. What would they say now? The bus finally stopped near the village market. Obina picked up his bag and stepped outside. The hot afternoon sun greeted him immediately. For a brief moment, nobody noticed him. Then someone recognized him. Wait, isn't that Obina? Another person turned. The billionaire. Soon several villagers gathered nearby. Whispers spread quickly. People stared openly. Obina forced himself to remain calm. He began walking toward the family house he had inherited from his late parents, but the whispers followed him. Look at him. He came back alone. What happened to all the money I heard he lost everything? Serves him right. Obina lowered his head and continued walking. Every word felt like a knife. The small house stood at the edge of the village. Years ago, he had renovated it for his parents before they passed away. After their deaths, the house remained mostly empty. Dust covered the furniture. Spider webs hung from the corners. The compound was overgrown with weeds. Obina stood silently in the doorway. This was all he had left. For the first time since losing his fortune, reality hit him completely. The billionaire was gone. This small village house was now his home. That evening he cleaned the house himself. He swept the floors. He removed old cobwebs. He opened the windows to let fresh air inside. By nightfall, exhaustion overwhelmed him. He lay on a simple mattress, staring at the ceiling. The silence felt strange. In Lagos, he had lived in a mansion filled with staff visitors and endless activity. Here there was nothing, just silence and painful memories. Sleep came slowly. The next morning, Obina woke before sunrise. Old habits from his business days remained. Back then, he had started work early. Now he had no company to manage, no meetings to attend, no employees waiting for instructions. He sat outside beneath a mango tree and wondered what to do next. His remaining savings were small. They would not last long. He needed a way to. The problem was that no one wanted to hire him. Some villagers believed he was cursed. Others thought he was secretly hiding money. Many simply enjoyed watching him suffer. Days passed. Obina searched for work wherever he could. He offered to help farmers. Most refused. He offered to assist traders. They refused too. Some laughed openly. The billionaire wants a job now. Go and ask your investors. Maybe your luxury cars can help you. The insults continued. Every day became harder. One afternoon, while sitting outside his house, an elderly hunter named Pa Keke stopped by. The old man studied him quietly. You look troubled. Obina smiled weakly. I am. Pa Keke sat beside him. What are your plans? Obina shook his head. I don't know anymore. The old hunter remained silent for a moment. Then he pointed toward the forest. My father taught me hunting when I was young. Obina listened. It fed my family for years. The old man stood slowly. If you are willing to learn, I can teach. You. For the first time in weeks, hope appeared. The next morning, Obina followed Pa Keke into the forest. The village forest stretched for miles. Towering trees blocked much of the sunlight. Birds sang from hidden branches. Small animals darted through the undergrowth. Obina quickly realized hunting was far more difficult than it appeared. The first day was exhausting. His feet hurt. Mosquitoes attacked him constantly. The heat drained his energy. Meanwhile, the 70-year-old hunter moved through the forest effortlessly. Several times, Obina stumbled. Several times, he nearly gave up. But Pa Keke encouraged him. Success comes from persistence. The words reminded Obina of his younger days, building his businesses. Gradually, he improved. He learned how to track animal footprints. He learned how to move quietly through the bush. He learned patience. Most importantly, he learned humility. Weeks later, Obina caught his first rabbit. The achievement seemed small compared to running billion-dollar companies. Yet he felt strangely proud. That evening he sold the rabbit at the market. The money was not much, but it was honest. He had earned it with his own hands. Soon hunting became his daily routine. Every morning before sunrise, he entered the forest carrying an old hunting rifle and a simple bag. Sometimes he returned with rabbits. Sometimes with antelope, sometimes with nothing at all. The income was modest, but it was enough to survive. Unfortunately, the villagers never stopped mocking him. Every day brought new insults. One afternoon, Obina walked through the market carrying 2 rabbits. A group of young men noticed him. One of them laughed loudly. "Look who is here." Another joined in. "The billionaire hunter." The group burst into laughter. Obina kept walking, but they followed him. "How much for the rabbits can we pay in company shares?" More laughter erupted. Several traders nearby joined the mockery. "The mighty businessman now sells bush meat." What a fall! Obina clenched his fists. Part of him wanted to respond. Part of him wanted to remind them of everything he had achieved, but another part of him was simply tired. So he continued walking. The laughter followed him all the way home. That night he sat alone, outside his house. The moon hung brightly overhead. The village was quiet, yet his mind was filled with noise, memories, regrets, pain. He thought about Chioma. He thought about his companies. He thought about the life he had lost. For a moment he questioned everything. Had all his hard work been meaningless? Had his success been an illusion? Perhaps the villagers were right. Perhaps he truly was a failure. The thought hurt deeply. Suddenly he heard footsteps approaching. He looked up. An elderly woman from the village stood nearby carrying a basket. She smiled kindly. "Good evening." "Good evening, Mama." The woman hesitated. "I bought one of your rabbits yesterday." Obina nodded. "Thank you. My grandchildren enjoyed it." For the first time in weeks, someone had spoken to him without mockery. The woman smiled again. "You are a good man." Then she continued walking. The conversation lasted less than a minute, yet it stayed with him. Not everyone hated him. Not everyone judged him by his bank account. The realization gave him strength. The following weeks passed. Obina continued hunting. The villagers continued laughing. Life settled into a difficult routine. Then one morning something unexpected happened. After returning from the forest with several rabbits, he arrived at the market. As usual, some people laughed. As usual, others whispered. But among the crowd stood a young woman he had never spoken to before. She appeared to be around 25 years old. Her dress was simple and worn. She carried a basket of vegetables on her head. Unlike everyone else, she wasn't laughing. She simply watched him quietly. Her eyes held something unusual kindness. Obina barely noticed her before continuing his work. He sold most of the rabbits and prepared to leave. Then he heard a gentle voice behind him. "Excuse me." He turned. A young woman stood there holding a small cloth purse. "I would like to buy 1 rabbit." Her smile was warm and sincere. No mockery, no pity, just respect. Obina handed her the rabbit. She paid carefully, counting every coin. It was obvious she did not have much money, yet she smiled brightly. "Thank you." Obina nodded. "You're welcome." For a moment neither moved. Then she spoke again. "You're Obina, right?" He hesitated. Most people used his name only to mock him. "Yes." The young woman smiled. "My name is Amaka." Something about her voice felt comforting, peaceful. Before leaving, she said words he had not heard in a very long time. "You're working hard. I respect that." Then she walked away. Obina stood frozen. The market noise faded into the background. For months people had laughed at him. For months people had treated him like a failure. Yet this stranger had offered him something priceless: respect. As he watched her disappear into the crowd, he had no idea that the young orphan named Amaka was about to change his life forever. After meeting Amaka at the market, Obina found himself thinking about her more than he expected. It wasn't because she was extraordinarily beautiful, although she possessed a natural beauty that needed no expensive clothes or jewelry to shine. It wasn't because she was wealthy or influential. In fact, she was neither. What stayed in his mind was her kindness. For months, almost everyone in the village had treated him like a joke. People laughed when they saw him carrying hunting equipment. They whispered behind his back. Some openly mocked him whenever he walked through the market. But Amaka had done something different. She had shown him respect. A simple gesture, yet it had meant more to him than she could possibly imagine. The following morning, Obina returned to the forest before sunrise. The cool air brushed against his skin as he walked beneath the towering trees. Birds sang from hidden branches while insects buzzed through the undergrowth. Normally, he focused entirely on hunting. Today, however, his thoughts kept drifting back to the young woman Amaka. He smiled slightly as he remembered her warm voice. "You're working hard. I respect that." Nobody had said anything like that to him in a very long time. By noon, he managed to catch 2 rabbits and a bushfowl. It wasn't a bad day. As usual, he headed toward the village market to sell his catch. The market was crowded. Women displayed vegetables on wooden tables. Traders shouted prices. Children ran between stalls laughing and playing. Obina found his usual spot and laid out the animals. Within an hour, he sold 1 rabbit. Then another. As he counted the money, he heard a familiar voice. "Good afternoon." He looked up. Amaka stood before him carrying a basket filled with tomatoes and peppers. A smile immediately appeared on her face. "Good afternoon." Obina found himself smiling back. "How is business today?" she asked. "Not bad." She glanced at the remaining bushfowl. "Looks like you're becoming a successful hunter." The joke was gentle and harmless. For the first time in months, Obina laughed. A genuine laugh. The sound surprised even him. Amaka noticed. "See, you should smile more often." Obina shook his head. "Life hasn't given me many reasons lately." Her expression softened. "I understand." For a moment, silence passed between them. Then Amaka purchased the bush fowl and thanked him before returning to her vegetable stall. Throughout the day, Obina occasionally found himself looking in her direction. Each time she seemed busy serving customers. Yet despite her hard work, she always carried herself with dignity and kindness. It made him curious. Who was she? Why was she different from everyone else? A few days later, he got his answer. The rain had fallen heavily throughout the night. By morning, muddy water covered many village paths. Obina finished hunting early and headed toward the market. Along the way, he noticed a woman struggling to push a wheelbarrow, loaded with firewood. The wheel had become stuck in the mud. Without thinking, he moved to help. As he approached, he realized the woman was Amaka. She looked exhausted. Sweat covered her forehead despite the cool weather. "Need help?" Obina asked. Amaka looked up. A smile appeared immediately. "I won't refuse." Together they pushed the wheelbarrow free. After several minutes of effort, it finally rolled onto firmer ground. Amaka wiped her forehead. "Thank you." "You're welcome." Obina looked at the heavy load. "Where are you taking all this?" "To the market." "You sell firewood too?" She nodded. "Vegetables don't always bring enough money." The answer surprised him. He glanced at her worn clothing and simple sandals. For the first time, he noticed how old they were. Yet she never complained, never asked for pity, never acted bitter. As they walked together toward the market, Obina finally asked the question that had been bothering him. "Do you live with your family?" The smile on Amaka's face faded slightly. "No, I'm sorry." She shrugged gently. "It's okay." "What happened?" For a moment she remained silent. Then she spoke quietly. My parents died when I was 10 years old. Obina felt his chest tighten. My father was involved in a road accident. She looked ahead. My mother became sick shortly afterward. The pain in her eyes was impossible to miss. She didn't survive. Obina didn't know what to say. I was sent to live with relatives. Her voice became softer. They treated me more like a servant than family. The story sounded painfully familiar. Life had not been kind to Amaka. Yet somehow she remained gentle. Somehow she still smiled. Somehow she still believed in kindness. By the time they reached the market, Obina's respect for her had grown tremendously. That evening he couldn't stop thinking about her story. Compared to what she had endured, perhaps his own suffering wasn't unique. The following weeks passed quickly. Without realizing it, Obina and Amaka began spending more time together. Their conversations became longer. Their friendship grew naturally. Sometimes they met at the market. Sometimes they crossed paths on village roads. Occasionally, Obina helped carry her firewood. Other times, Amaka bought bush meat from him. Slowly, a routine developed. One afternoon, Obina arrived at the market after a disappointing day in the forest. He hadn't caught anything, not a single rabbit, not a single bird. Nothing. His mood was dark. He sat quietly beneath a tree wondering how he would pay for food that week. A shadow appeared beside him. Amaka. She carried two wrapped portions of food. Without saying anything, she handed one to him. Obina frowned. "What's this?" "Lunch. I can't take your food." "You can." "No." Amaka sat beside him. "Then let's share it." Before he could protest, she opened the package. The aroma of rice and vegetable stew filled the air. Obina's stomach growled immediately. Amaka laughed. "I think your stomach already agreed." Reluctantly, he accepted. As they ate together beneath the tree, something unusual happened. For the first time since losing everything, Obina felt peaceful. Not happy, not completely healed, but peaceful. The feeling was unfamiliar yet comforting. Several villagers passed nearby and noticed them together. Whispers immediately began. "Look, the failed billionaire and the orphan. What a pair." They laughed as they continued walking. Obina's face darkened, but Amaka simply continued eating. "Doesn't it bother you?" he asked. "What? What people say?" Amaka shrugged. "People always talk. They insult you too. They insult everyone." Her answer surprised him. "Don't you get angry?" "Sometimes." She smiled slightly. "But if I spend my life worrying about people's opinions, when will I have time to live my own life?" Obina stared at her. The simplicity of her wisdom amazed him. For years, he had built companies worth billions. He had negotiated major contracts. He had spoken before powerful investors. Yet this young orphan seemed to understand life better than many successful people. As the weeks turned into months, their friendship deepened further. Obina began looking forward to seeing her each day. Without realizing it, she had become the brightest part of his life. Then one evening, something happened that changed everything. The village held its annual cultural festival. People gathered in the town square. Music played loudly. Traditional dancers performed. Food vendors filled the area. The celebration attracted villagers from surrounding communities. Obina rarely attended social events anymore, but Pa Keke convinced him to go. "You spend too much time alone," the old hunter said. Reluctantly, Obina agreed. As he walked through the crowded square, he noticed people staring. Some still whispered. Some still mocked him. But the insults no longer hurt as much as before. Then he saw her Amaka. She stood near one of the food stalls wearing a simple blue dress. The dress was inexpensive, yet she looked beautiful. For a moment, Obina found himself unable to look away. Amaka noticed him and smiled. The smile instantly brightened his evening. "You're here," she said. I could say the same. They spent much of the festival together. They watched dancers. They listened to music. They laughed about childhood memories. Hours passed unnoticed. As night fell, colorful lanterns illuminated the square. The atmosphere felt magical. At one point, they stood quietly watching a group of children perform traditional dances. Neither spoke. Neither needed to. The silence felt comfortable, natural, peaceful. Then Amaka turned toward him. "You know something what you've changed." Obina frowned. "Changed. When you first returned to the village, you always looked sad. You remained silent. You looked like someone carrying the weight of the world. And now," she smiled. "Now you smile sometimes." Obina laughed softly. "Only sometimes. Maybe twice a week." They both laughed. Yet, deep inside, Obina knew she was right. He had changed little by little, day by day, and much of that change was because of her. As the festival ended and villagers began returning home, Obina walked Amaka back to her small house. The moon illuminated the narrow path ahead. When they reached her gate, they stopped. "Thank you for tonight," Amaka said. "I should be thanking you." She smiled. "Good night, Obina." "Good night, Amaka." He watched her disappear inside. Then he turned and began walking home. A strange warmth filled his chest. For months after losing everything, he had believed his life was over. He had believed happiness was gone forever. But now something new was beginning. Something neither wealth nor success could buy. Neither of them knew it yet, but the friendship growing between them was slowly becoming the foundation of something much deeper. Something that would eventually change both their lives forever. The weeks following the village festival brought a new sense of peace into Obina's life. His circumstances had not changed. He was still poor. He still hunted every day to survive. The villagers still mocked him whenever they got the opportunity. Yet somehow things felt different. The difference was Amaka. For the first time since losing everything, Obina no longer felt completely alone. Every morning before entering the forest, he found himself wondering if he would see her later at the market. Every evening he looked forward to their conversations. Sometimes they spoke for only a few minutes. Other times they talked until sunset. The friendship had become an important part of both their lives. One morning Obina woke before dawn as usual. The sky was still dark when he picked up his hunting bag and old rifle. As he stepped outside, he noticed movement near his gate. Someone was standing there. He moved closer. It was Amaka. She carried a small basket covered with a cloth. Obina frowned. "Amaka." She smiled. "Good morning. What are you doing here this early?" Instead of answering, she handed him the basket. "Open it." Curious, Obina lifted the cloth. Inside were roasted yams and a bottle of water. He looked up in surprise. "What's this for?" "You spend all day in the forest." "Yes, and sometimes you forget to eat." Obina smiled. "How do you know that I know?" "Because you told me." He laughed softly. She was right. A few weeks earlier, he had casually mentioned spending entire days hunting without food. Apparently, Amaka remembered. "You didn't have to do this." "I know. Thank you." For a moment, neither spoke. The early morning breeze moved gently through the trees. Then Amaka pointed toward the forest. "You should go before all the animals disappear." Obina laughed. "If they disappear, I'll blame you." "That's fine." As he walked away, he glanced back. She was still standing there, smiling. The sight stayed with him throughout the day. Deep in the forest, while waiting quietly near a game trail, he found himself thinking about how unusual Amaka was. Most people cared about what he used to be. Amaka cared about who he was now. The difference meant everything. That afternoon, Obina returned from hunting carrying 2 rabbits. As he approached the market, he noticed a small crowd gathered around Amaka's vegetable stall. At first, he thought business was going well. Then he heard shouting. His smile disappeared. A wealthy trader named Ma Mangozi stood in front of Amaka. The older woman looked furious. "You call these fresh? Tomatoes. They are fresh," Amaka replied calmly. "Are you calling me a liar?" "No, Mama." Several villagers watched the argument with interest. Ma Mangozi picked up a tomato. "This one has a small bruise." Amaka nodded. "I can replace it." But the woman continued shouting. Obina quickly realized the issue wasn't really about tomatoes. Ma Mangozi simply enjoyed bullying people she considered beneath her. And, as an orphan, Amaka was an easy target. Obina stepped forward. "Is there a problem?" Ma Mangozi turned. Immediately her face twisted with contempt. "Oh, look who came to help." Several people laughed. The failed billionaire. Obina ignored them. He focused on Amaka. "Are you okay?" She nodded. "I'm fine." Ma Mangozi scoffed. "Of course you would defend each other." More laughter followed. The poor orphan and the poor hunter. Obina felt anger rising inside him. But before he could respond, Amaka gently touched his arm. The simple gesture stopped him. She shook her head slightly. "Don't." Obina understood. Arguing would accomplish nothing. Eventually, Ma Mangozi left after receiving a replacement tomato. The crowd dispersed. Once they were alone, Obina looked at Amaka. "Why didn't you defend yourself?" She smiled weakly. "Because some battles aren't worth fighting." "She was insulting you." "She insults everyone." Obina sighed. "I don't like seeing people treat you that way." Amaka's expression softened. "And I don't like seeing people treat you that way either." For a moment neither spoke. The connection between them seemed to deepen. Both understood what it felt like to be judged unfairly. Both knew what it meant to suffer. And perhaps because of that they understood each other better than anyone else could. Days later, heavy rain arrived. For 3 straight days storms swept through the village. The roads became rivers of mud. The market remained mostly empty. Hunting became nearly impossible. Obina spent much of his time at home repairing old furniture and cleaning. On the third afternoon, he heard knocking at his door. When he opened it, he found Amaka standing outside soaked by rain. "Amaka." She laughed. "I know. You're completely wet." "The rain informed me." Obina stepped aside. "Come inside." She entered while he quickly found a towel. Soon they sat near the window listening to rain pound against the roof. For hours they talked. They spoke about childhood memories, favorite foods, dreams. They once had dreams they still had. The conversation eventually turned serious. Amaka stared at the rain. "Can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Do you miss it?" Obina knew exactly what she meant. His old life, the wealth, the companies, the success. He remained silent for a long moment. Then he nodded. "Sometimes. Only sometimes." He laughed softly. "Okay, often." Amaka smiled. "What do you miss most?" Obina thought carefully. The answer surprised even him. "Not the money." Amaka looked curious. "Then what?" "The feeling that I was building something." She nodded slowly. "I understand. I miss having goals." "You still have goals?" Obina shook his head. "Not like before." Amaka stared out the window. Then she spoke quietly. "I think you're wrong." Obina frowned. "Why?" "Because you're still building something." "What?" A small smile appeared on her face. "Your life." The answer stunned him. For years people had admired his intelligence. Investors respected his decisions. Business leaders sought his advice. Yet this simple village girl continually saw things he overlooked. That evening after Amaka left, her words remained in his mind. Maybe she was right. Maybe life wasn't over. Maybe he was simply beginning again. As months passed, their friendship grew even stronger. They became inseparable. People noticed. The village began talking. Again, one afternoon, several women gathered near a well discussing them. I see those two together every day. Of course, the hunter and the orphan. Another woman laughed. Who else would want either of them? The group burst into laughter. Unfortunately, Amaka overheard everything. She said nothing, but later that evening, Obina noticed she seemed unusually quiet. As they sat beneath their favorite mango tree, he finally asked, "What's wrong?" "Nothing. You always say that when something is wrong." Amaka smiled reluctantly. "People were talking today. About us." She nodded. Obina sighed. "What did they say?" Amaka hesitated. "That we're both failures." The words hung heavily between them. Obina looked away. Part of him knew the villagers believed exactly that. A failed billionaire, poor orphan, two people society had discarded. For several minutes, silence filled the air. Then Obina spoke. "Do you know something, what? When I first came back to this village, I thought losing my money was the worst thing that could happen." Amaka listened carefully. "But now I realize something. What I was wrong." She waited. "The worst thing would have been losing my character." Amaka smiled. "And you didn't?" "No." He looked at her. "Neither did you." For the first time that evening, genuine happiness returned to her face. The sun slowly began setting. Orange light painted the sky. Birds flew overhead toward their nests. Everything felt peaceful. Then Amaka asked a question. "Do you ever think about leaving?" Obina frowned. "Leaving the village?" She nodded. "Yes." He thought for a moment. "Not anymore." Why his answer came honestly. "Because this place gave me something I couldn't find in Lagos." Amaka looked curious. What Obina smiled. "A true friend." The words made her blush slightly. She looked away. Neither noticed the strange feeling that suddenly filled the space between them. Neither recognized it yet. But friendship was slowly becoming something deeper, something stronger. Something neither wealth nor poverty could change. As darkness settled over the village, they sat together beneath the mango tree, discussing their dreams for the future. Neither had much. Neither possessed wealth or influence. Yet both carried hope. And sometimes hope was enough. Far away, destiny was already preparing opportunities neither of them could imagine. But before those opportunities arrived, their friendship would need to survive more challenges. Challenges that would reveal just how much they truly meant to one another. And with each passing day, the bond between Obina and Amaka grew stronger than ever before. The friendship between Obina and Amaka continued to grow stronger with each passing day. Neither of them planned it. Neither of them expected it. It simply happened naturally. What began as simple conversations in the market had become an important part of their lives. Every morning Obina looked forward to seeing her. Every evening Amaka found herself smiling whenever she thought about him. Yet neither had spoken about the feelings quietly growing inside their hearts. Perhaps they were afraid. Perhaps they didn't fully understand those feelings themselves. Or perhaps both had suffered enough disappointments to be cautious. Whatever the reason, they remained friends, at least on the surface. One bright morning, Obina returned from the forest carrying a large antelope. It was the biggest catch he had made in months. The animal attracted attention immediately. Villagers gathered around him as he walked toward the market. Some stared in surprise. Others whispered, A few even congratulated him. When he reached the market, the meat sold quickly. By midday, he had earned more money than usual. For the first time in weeks, he felt optimistic. As he finished counting the money, he noticed Amaka approaching. She carried a basket filled with vegetables balanced carefully on her head. The moment she saw him, her face lit up. "I heard the hunter became." Obina laughed. "If this is rich, then I have been poor for too long." Amaka giggled. The sound instantly brightened his mood. "I heard you caught a huge antelope. It wasn't easy." "I believe that." She glanced at the empty table. "So everything sold?" "Yes." "Then congratulations." Before he could reply, she reached into her basket and handed him a small orange. Obina looked confused. "What's this?" "A gift." "For what?" "For working hard." He stared at the fruit. It was such a simple thing, yet somehow it touched him deeply. During his billionaire days, people had given him expensive watches, luxury cars, and costly gifts. Most of those gifts had come with expectations. Most people wanted something in return. Amaka's orange cost almost nothing. Yet it felt more genuine than anything he had received in years. "Thank you," he said quietly. Her smile widened. "You're welcome." As she walked away, Obina found himself watching her longer than usual. Something was changing inside him, something he could no longer ignore. That evening, while sitting outside his house, Obina thought about his life. The village was quiet. Crickets chirped in the darkness. A gentle breeze moved through the trees. His thoughts drifted toward Amaka again. Lately, she seemed to occupy his mind constantly. He thought about her kindness, her courage, her laughter, her smile, the way she always believed in him when nobody else did. The realization arrived suddenly. He was falling in love. The thought startled him. After everything that happened with Chioma, he had promised himself never to trust his heart so easily again. The pain of betrayal still lingered. Sometimes he still remembered the day Chioma walked away. Sometimes he still heard her words. "I can't marry a man whose future is uncertain." The memory hurt. But when he compared Chioma to Amaka, the difference was impossible to ignore. Chioma loved success. Amaka loved people. Chioma stayed when life was easy. Amaka appeared when life was difficult. Chioma saw his money. Amaka saw him. For the first time, Obina began wondering if real love had been standing beside him all along. A few days later, an opportunity arrived that brought them even closer. The village primary school announced plans to repair several damaged classrooms. The school lacked funds, so volunteers were needed. Many villagers ignored the request. Others claimed they were too busy. Obina decided to help. To his surprise, Amaka volunteered too. For the next week, they worked side by side. They carried wood. They repaired broken desks. They painted classroom walls. They cleaned the school compound. The work was tiring, yet neither complained. One afternoon, while painting a classroom, Amaka accidentally splashed paint on Obina's shirt. She gasped. "Oh no." Obina looked down at the stain. For a second, he pretended to be angry. Then he smiled. "You attacked me." Amaka burst into laughter. "It was an accident." "That's exactly what all criminals say." She laughed even harder. Soon both of them were laughing so much they could barely continue painting. Several children nearby watched curiously. One little girl approached them. "Are you husband and wife?" Both froze. The question caught them completely off guard. Amaka's cheeks turned red immediately. Obina almost dropped his paintbrush. The child looked confused. "You're always together." Several other children nodded in agreement. Amaka quickly looked away. Obina cleared his throat awkwardly. "No, we're not married." The little girl shrugged. "You should be." Then she ran away. For several seconds, silence filled the room. Neither knew what to say. Eventually, Amaka spoke. Children say anything. Yes. Another awkward silence followed. Yet neither could stop thinking about the child's words. That evening, after finishing work at the school, they walked home together. The sunset painted the sky with beautiful shades of orange and gold. Birds flew overhead. The village road stretched quietly before them. As they walked, Obina noticed how peaceful he felt whenever he was around her. The feeling was unlike anything he had experienced before. It wasn't excitement. It wasn't passion alone. It was deeper, safer, stronger. For the first time in years, he felt understood. Several days later, something happened that forced Obina to confront his feelings completely. While hunting in the forest, he slipped on wet ground and injured his ankle. The pain was sharp. By the time he reached home, walking had become difficult. News spread quickly through the village. That evening, Amaka arrived carrying food and herbal medicine. You should be resting. I'm fine. She crossed her arms. No, you're stubborn. Obina laughed. Maybe a little. Amaka spent the next hour helping him clean the wound. Her concern was obvious. Every time he winced, she looked worried. Every time he tried to stand, she told him to sit down. Watching her care for him stirred something powerful inside his heart. Nobody had looked after him like this in years. Not even Kioma. As Amaka prepared to leave, she paused near the door. Promise me something. What, stay off your ankle for a few days? Obina smiled. I promise. Only after she left did he realize he had spent the entire evening smiling. The following morning, he woke to find fresh food outside his door. No note was attached. None was needed. He knew exactly who had left it. The same thing happened the next day and the day after that. Amaka checked on him constantly until his ankle healed. Her kindness overwhelmed him. One evening, as the sun slowly disappeared beyond the horizon, Obina sat beneath the large mango tree where they often talked. His ankle had recovered. The air was cool and peaceful. A few minutes later, Amaka arrived carrying 2 bottles of water. She handed one to him before sitting beside him. For a while, they watched the sunset in silence. Then Obina spoke. Can I ask you something? Of course. Why are you always so kind? Amaka looked surprised. What do you mean? You help everyone. She smiled softly. Not everyone. Me. Amaka stared at the fading sunlight. When she finally spoke, her voice was gentle. Because I know what it feels like when nobody helps. The answer touched him deeply. She continued. When my parents died, many people ignored me. Obina listened quietly. I promised myself something. What if I ever had the chance to make someone's life easier, I would. Tears almost formed in Obina's eyes. The simplicity of her heart amazed him. For years he had searched for intelligent business partners, powerful connections, important relationships. Yet the most valuable person he had ever met was sitting beside him under a mango tree. As darkness slowly settled over the village, Obina finally opened his heart. He told her things he had never shared before. The fear he felt after losing his businesses, the loneliness that followed the humiliation of returning to the village, the betrayal by his fiancée, the nights he spent wondering if life was worth continuing. Amaka listened quietly. She never interrupted. She never judged. She simply listened. When he finished speaking, silence filled the air. For a long moment, neither moved. Then Amaka turned toward him. The moonlight illuminated her face. Her eyes were filled with compassion. Obina, yes. Your wealth never made you valuable. He looked at her. Your character did. The words struck him like lightning. For months he had believed his value came from success, from achievements, from money, from status. But Amaka saw something different. She saw the man beneath the titles, the man beneath the wealth, the man beneath the failure, and she still respected him, still believed in him, still cared about him. At that moment, everything became clear. Obina finally understood what his heart had been trying to tell him. He loved her. Not because she was beautiful, not because she was kind, not because she stood beside him when others walked away, though all those things mattered. He loved her because she saw him completely and chose to stay. The realization filled his heart with warmth unlike anything he had ever experienced. As they sat together beneath the stars, neither spoke about love. Not yet, but something had changed, something important, something irreversible. For the first time since losing everything, Obina wasn't thinking about his past. He wasn't thinking about the businesses he lost. He wasn't thinking about Chioma. He wasn't thinking about failure. He was thinking about a future. And in that future, Amaka was standing beside him. The friendship that began in the market had blossomed into something much deeper, something stronger, something beautiful. And very soon Obina would find the courage to tell her exactly how he felt. After that evening beneath the mango tree, Obina's life changed completely. Nothing around him was different. His small house remained the same. His hunting routine remained the same. The villagers still mocked him whenever they had the chance. Yet inside his heart everything had changed. For the first time in years he was in love. Not the kind of love built on appearances. Not the kind of love that depended on wealth, status, or success. This was different. This was real. Every morning Amaka was the first person he thought about. Every night she was the last person on his mind before he slept. Her kindness, her laughter, her strength, her unwavering belief in him. The more he thought about her, the more certain he became. She was the woman he wanted to spend the rest of his life with. The realization both excited and frightened him. Because there was one problem. Obina had nothing. No fortune, no company, no luxury house, no expensive car, no savings worth mentioning. Only a small village house and a hunting rifle. What kind of future could he offer her? The question haunted him for days. One afternoon, while helping Pa Keiki repair a fishing net, Obina finally spoke about it. The old hunter listened quietly. "So you love her?" Obina smiled. "Very much." Pa Keiki nodded knowingly. "Then what is the problem?" "I have nothing." The old man laughed. "You keep saying that. It's true." "No." Pa Keiki pointed at him. "You have integrity." Obina remained silent. "You have courage." The old hunter continued. "You survived losing everything." Obina looked away. "And most importantly, you have a good heart." Pao Keke smiled. "Many rich men cannot say the same." The words stayed with Obina long after their conversation ended. That evening he sat outside his house watching the sunset. For months he had measured his worth by what he had lost. Maybe it was time to measure himself by what remained. And what remained was something no bank could seize. His character, his dignity, his ability to love. The following morning he made a decision. He was going to ask Amaka to marry him. The thought immediately made his stomach tighten with nervousness. Obina had negotiated multi-million-dollar business deals without fear. He had spoken before large audiences. He had met presidents and powerful executives. Yet the idea of proposing to Amaka terrified him because this mattered more. Over the next several days he carefully planned everything. His plan was simple. That was all he could afford. He couldn't buy an expensive engagement ring. He couldn't organize a grand romantic event. But he wanted the moment to be special. One afternoon, while walking through the forest, he found a beautiful clearing beneath a large mango tree. The tree stood alone near a small stream. Sunlight filtered through the branches, Birds sang nearby. The place felt peaceful, perfect. Immediately he knew this was where he would propose. The only thing missing was a ring. Unfortunately, buying one was impossible. Even the simplest jewelry cost more than he could afford. The problem troubled him. Then inspiration arrived unexpectedly. An elderly craftsman in the village carved wooden ornaments by hand. Obina visited him. The next day, after explaining what he wanted, the old man smiled. For Amaka, Obina laughed. Is it that obvious? The entire village knows. Obina shook his head. Of course they did. Nothing remains secret for long in a village. 3 days later, the craftsman handed him a beautiful handmade ring carved from polished mahogany wood. The ring was simple, yet elegant. Obina stared at it quietly. It wasn't expensive. It wasn't flashy, but somehow it felt perfect. The old craftsman smiled. Real love doesn't need diamonds. Obina carefully placed the ring inside his pocket. Now he was ready, or at least as ready as he could be. The following Saturday, he invited Amaka for a walk. She agreed immediately. As they followed a narrow path leading toward the forest, Obina's heart pounded so loudly he was certain she could hear it. Meanwhile, Amaka chatted happily about the market, completely unaware of what was about to happen. "Why are you so quiet today?" she asked. Obina forced a smile. "Just thinking. About hunting. Something like that." She laughed. "You look nervous." If only she knew. After several minutes, they arrived at the clearing. The sunlight danced through the leaves. The stream flowed gently nearby. Everything looked exactly as Obina had imagined. Amaka stopped and looked around. "It's beautiful. I thought you'd like it." She smiled. "I do." For a moment, neither spoke. The breeze moved gently through the branches overhead. Birds chirped somewhere in the distance. The peaceful atmosphere seemed almost magical. Obina took a deep breath. This was the moment. He turned toward her. "Amaka." Something in his voice made her expression change immediately. "Yes, I need to tell you something." She looked curious. "What is it?" Obina's heart raced. For a few seconds, words refused to come. Then, finally, he spoke. "When I first came back to this village, I thought my life was over." Amaka listened quietly. "I lost my businesses." He swallowed hard. "I lost my money." His voice softened. "I lost the woman I thought I would marry." Pain briefly crossed his face. "I lost almost everything." Amaka stepped closer. Obina continued. "Then I met you." Tears began forming in her eyes. "You treated me with kindness when everyone else mocked me." His voice grew stronger. "You respected me when others laughed at me." He smiled softly. "You believed in me when I didn't even believe in myself." Amaka's eyes glistened. The emotion between them was undeniable. For months, they had danced around their feelings. Now everything stood exposed, open, honest, real. Obina reached into his pocket and removed the wooden ring. Amaka gasped softly. He dropped to one knee. Immediately, tears spilled down her cheeks. "Amaka," his voice trembled. "I have no wealth." More tears flowed. "I have no luxury house." She covered her mouth. "I have no expensive gifts." The wooden ring rested in his hand. "All I have is my heart." For a moment, silence filled the clearing. Even the birds seemed quiet. Then Obina asked the question that would change both their lives forever. "Will you marry me?" Amaka burst into tears. Not tears of sadness. Tears of overwhelming happiness. For several seconds she couldn't speak. She simply stared at him, at the man who had lost everything, the man who had fought through humiliation and heartbreak, the man whose character remained strong despite all his suffering, the man she loved. Finally, she nodded. Yes. Obina's heart nearly stopped. Amaka laughed through her tears. Yes. He stood quickly. You mean it. She laughed again. Of course, I mean it. The next moment they embraced. Neither cared about the flash world around them. Neither cared about money. Neither cared about the future. They only cared about each other. After a few moments, Obina gently placed the wooden ring on her finger. Amaka admired it immediately. It's beautiful. Obina smiled sheepishly. It's not much. She shook her head. It's perfect. Then she surprised him. Do you know why? Why? Because you made it special. The words touched him deeply. For the rest of the afternoon, they remained near the stream, talking about their future. A future that suddenly felt bright. A future they would face together. Eventually they returned to the village. Unfortunately, news traveled faster than they did. By the time they arrived, people already knew. Someone had apparently seen the proposal, and the reactions were exactly what they expected. The next morning, the market buzzed with gossip. The orphan accepted. Can you believe it? A group of women laughed loudly. Of course she accepted. Another woman joined in. Who else would marry a failed billionaire? The group burst into laughter. Nearby, several men shared similar opinions. The poor orphan and the poor hunter. What a perfect match. They belong together. Everywhere they went, whispers followed them. Mockery, laughter, insults. Yet something was different this time. Neither Obina nor Amaka seemed bothered. Because unlike before, they faced the criticism together. One afternoon, while sitting beneath their favorite mango tree, Amaka laughed as another villager made a rude comment. Obina looked surprised. You're laughing. Yes. Why? Amaka smiled. Because they're wrong. About what? She held up her hand, admiring the wooden ring. They think we're poor. Obina looked confused. We are poor. She shook her head. No. What do you mean? Amaka looked into his eyes. We may not have money. Her smile widened. But we have each other. For a moment, Obina couldn't speak. The simple truth of her words overwhelmed him. Money could disappear. Businesses could fail. People could betray you. But genuine love was priceless. As the sun slowly set behind the village, they sat together watching the sky turn gold and orange. The future remained uncertain. Challenges still lay ahead. Neither knew what tomorrow would bring. But for the first time in a very long time, neither was afraid. Because whatever happened next, they would face it together. And somewhere beyond the horizon, destiny was already preparing a miracle neither of them could imagine. A miracle that would soon change their lives forever. The news of Obina and Amaka's engagement spread through the village faster than wildfire. By the following morning, everyone was talking about it. At the market, at the village square, at the stream where women fetched water, even inside small family compounds. Everywhere people gathered, the same conversation could be heard. The former billionaire is marrying the orphan. What a strange couple. A failed billionaire and a poor orphan. They truly belong together. Many people laughed whenever the topic came up. Some shook their heads in disbelief. Others treated the engagement as entertainment. Unfortunately, Obina and Amaka heard most of it. Yet neither allowed the criticism to destroy their happiness. They had already survived worse. Obina had lost billions. Amaka had lost her parents. Compared to those hardships, village gossip seemed small. Still, preparing for a wedding without money was not easy. One evening they sat beneath the familiar mango tree discussing their plans. Obina stared at the ground. I wish I could give you better wedding. Amaka immediately shook her head. Why? You deserve one. She smiled softly. According to who Obina looked at her. You. Amaka laughed. I never asked for a big wedding. You deserve one anyway. She reached for his hand. Obina, he looked up. The wedding isn't important. It isn't, no. She squeezed his hand gently. The marriage is. The simple statement silenced him. Once again, Amaka reminded him what truly mattered. She always seemed to do that. The following weeks were spent preparing as best they could. There was no wedding planner, no expensive decorations, no designer outfits, no luxury venue. Instead, neighbors who cared about them offered small contributions. Pao Keke donated several wooden chairs. An elderly woman volunteered to cook soup. A local tailor agreed to sew simple wedding clothes at a reduced price. A group of village children gathered flowers from nearby fields. The generosity touched both Obina and Amaka deeply. Not everyone in the village mocked them. A few people genuinely wanted to see them happy. One afternoon, while helping arrange chairs for the ceremony, Obina noticed Pa Keke smiling. What the old hunter chuckled. You remind me of your father. Obina paused. My father. He loved your mother the same way. A warm smile appeared on Obina's face. They were happy. Pa Keke nodded. Very happy. The old man's expression grew thoughtful. Your father wasn't rich when he married her either. Obina listened carefully. But they built a wonderful life together. The words filled him with hope. Perhaps he and Amaka could do the same. Perhaps happiness truly had little to do with money. A few days before the wedding, something unexpected happened. As Obina returned from hunting, he noticed several young men standing outside his house. The moment they saw him, they began laughing. One of them pointed toward the old building, future mansion of the billionaire. The others burst into laughter. Another added, make sure the bride doesn't get lost inside all those empty rooms. More laughter followed. Years earlier, insults like that would have angered Obina. Now he simply smiled. The young men looked surprised. Aren't you angry? Obina shook his head. No. Why not? He thought about Amaka. Then he smiled again. Because I'm happy. The answer confused them. Without another word, he walked inside his house. The laughter behind him slowly faded. That evening he told Amaka what happened. She laughed so hard tears appeared in her eyes. You should have seen their faces. I wish I had. They were disappointed. Why? Because they wanted me to be angry. Amaka smiled. They don't understand. Understand? What? That happy people are difficult to insult. The wisdom of her words amazed him once again. The day before the wedding finally arrived, the village buzzed with anticipation. Not because people were excited for the couple. Many were simply curious. Some wanted entertainment. Others expected disaster. A few believed Amaka would change her mind at the last minute. One woman confidently announced in the market, no sensible woman would marry a hunter with no future. Unfortunately, for her, Amaka overheard the comment. She simply smiled and continued shopping. The woman looked disappointed. Apparently, she had hoped for a reaction. That night, neither Obina nor Amaka slept much. Excitement filled their hearts. So did nervousness. For years, both had dreamed about finding someone who truly loved them. Now that dream was finally becoming reality. As dawn approached, Obina sat outside his house watching the sky brighten. A strange mixture of emotions swirled inside him. Gratitude, joy, hope. For months he had believed his life was over. Now he was preparing to marry the woman he loved. Life truly was unpredictable. Meanwhile, across the village, Amaka was getting ready. Several elderly women helped her prepare. Her wedding dress was simple. Plain white fabric sewn by the village tailor. No expensive jewelry decorated her neck. No luxury accessories completed the outfit. Yet, when she looked in the mirror, she smiled. Not because of the dress, because of what the day represented. For the first time in her life, she felt chosen, loved, valued. No longer the forgotten orphan. No longer the lonely girl struggling to survive. Today, she would become someone's wife, someone who genuinely cared about her. The thought brought tears to her eyes. Around mid-morning, villagers began gathering near the small church where the ceremony would take place. The building was modest. The decorations were simple. Flowers lined the entrance. Wooden chairs filled the interior. Nothing about the wedding was luxurious, yet everything about it felt sincere. As guests arrived, whispers immediately spread through the crowd. "Can you believe this? The former billionaire really fell this far." Another person laughed. "At least the bride matches his situation." More laughter followed. Several people attended solely because they wanted to witness what they considered a strange spectacle. A poor orphan marrying a failed billionaire. To them, it seemed almost ridiculous. Inside the church, Obina waited nervously. His simple suit had been borrowed from a friend. He looked toward the entrance repeatedly. His heart pounded. Suddenly the music began. Everyone turned. Amarachi appeared at the doorway. The entire room fell silent. She wasn't wearing a designer gown. She wasn't covered in expensive jewelry. Yet she looked beautiful, radiant, confident, happy. As she slowly walked toward him, Obina felt his eyes filling with tears. Nothing else mattered. Not the whispers, not the laughter, not the judgment, only her. The woman who stood beside him when everyone else walked away. The woman who believed in him when he had lost faith in himself. The woman who taught him that true worth had nothing to do with wealth. As Amarachi reached the front of the church, their eyes met. Both smiled. The ceremony began. The pastor spoke about love, about commitment, about faithfulness during difficult times. Every word seemed written specifically for them. Then came the vows. When it was Obina's turn, he took a deep breath. His voice trembled slightly. "Amaka, when I lost everything, I believed my life was finished." Several people listened quietly. "Then God brought you into my life." Tears appeared in Amaka's eyes. "You gave me hope when I had none." His voice grew stronger. "You reminded me who I was." A tear rolled down his cheek. "And I promised to spend the rest of my life loving and honoring you." By the time he finished, many people in the church had become emotional. Then it was Amaka's turn. She smiled through her tears. Obina people see a failed billionaire. The room became silent. "I see a good man." Several villagers lowered their eyes. "You taught me that true strength comes from character." Her voice shook with emotion. "And I promise to stand beside you, no matter what happens." Not a single person laughed now. The sincerity of their love was impossible to ignore. Moments later, they exchanged rings. The simple wooden ring remained on Amaka's finger. A matching ring rested on Obina's hand. Then came the words they had been waiting to hear. "I now pronounce you husband and wife." The church erupted with applause. Some guests clapped politely. Others clapped enthusiastically. A few even wiped tears from their eyes. Obina and Amaka shared their first kiss as husband and wife. The applause grew louder. For the first time that day, the laughter and mockery disappeared completely. Even the harshest critics could see something undeniable. Their love was real. After the ceremony, a modest reception took place beneath a large canopy near the church. The food was simple: rice soup, stew, soft drinks, nothing extravagant, yet people ate happily. Music played, children danced, guests mingled. Throughout the celebration, many villagers continued making comments. The poor orphan and the failed billionaire, they truly belonged together, but now the words sounded different, almost harmless, because deep down Obina and Amaka knew something. The villagers did not. Success wasn't measured by bank accounts. It wasn't measured by houses or cars. It wasn't measured by status. True success was finding someone who loved you for who you were, and in that regard they were already rich. As the reception ended and the sun began setting, Obina and Amaka stood together watching the beautiful evening sky. The future remained uncertain. Money was still scarce. Challenges still existed, but neither felt afraid. They had each other, and that was enough. Neither of them realized it yet, but destiny was already moving behind the scenes. Far beyond their small village, far beyond Nigeria, an opportunity was approaching, an opportunity that would soon change everything. But for now they simply stood together holding hands. Poor orphan, a failed billionaire, a husband and wife deeply in love. And for the first time in a very long time believed the best chapters of their lives were still ahead. The first morning after their wedding, Obina woke up before sunrise, as usual. For a few seconds he stared at the ceiling, confused by the strange feeling of happiness filling his chest. Then he remembered he was married. A smile immediately appeared on his face. Turning his head, he saw Amaka sleeping peacefully beside him. The early morning light filtered softly through the window, illuminating her face. For a moment, Obina simply watched her. After everything he had lost, after all the pain and humiliation, he had somehow gained something far more valuable. Partner, a best friend, a wife. Quietly, he slipped out of bed so he wouldn't wake her. As he stepped outside, the village was still asleep. Birds chirped from nearby trees. The cool morning breeze carried the scent of fresh earth. For the first time in many months, Obina felt hopeful about the future. The future remained uncertain. Money was still scarce. Life was still difficult. But now he wasn't facing those difficulties alone. A few minutes later, he heard footsteps behind him. Amaka appeared carrying 2 cups of tea. She smiled. "I knew you would wake up early." Obina laughed. "Old habits." She handed him a cup. The two sat quietly on the wooden bench outside their house. Neither spoke. Neither needed to. The peaceful silence felt comfortable. Then Amaka suddenly smiled. She laughed softly. "I was just thinking about what we're married." Obina grinned. "Yes, we are." For a few moments, both simply sat there smiling like children. The happiness was simple, pure, real. Over the following weeks, married life settled into a routine. Every morning, Obina entered the forest to hunt. Every morning, Amaka headed to the market with vegetables, firewood, and sometimes palm fruits she collected. Their income remained small. Some days were good. Some days were terrible. But they worked together, and somehow that made everything easier. One afternoon, Obina returned from hunting carrying only a single rabbit. It had been a difficult day. The forest was unusually quiet. Most of the animals seemed to have disappeared. As he approached their house, disappointment weighed heavily on him. The rabbit would barely earn enough money for food. When he entered the compound, Amaka immediately noticed his expression. "Tough day," Obina nodded. "Very." Amaka smiled. "Good." He blinked. "Good," she laughed. "That means tomorrow can only be better." Obina shook his head. "You always find a way to be positive." "Someone has to." Her optimism made him smile despite his frustration. That evening they shared a simple meal of yam and vegetable soup. It wasn't much, but they enjoyed every bite. As they ate, they talked about their dreams. Not impossible dreams, not fantasies, simple dreams. One day they hoped to renovate their house. One day they hoped to own a small farm. One day they hoped to help orphan children in the village. The dreams were modest, yet they felt meaningful. For the first time in years, Obina's goals weren't focused on becoming richer. They were focused on building a good life. Peaceful life. A meaningful life. Meanwhile, the villagers continued talking. Some people still mocked them. Others shook their heads whenever they saw the couple. One afternoon, a group of women spotted Amaka walking through the market. "There goes the billionaire's wife." The comment triggered laughter. Another woman added, "What billionaire?" More laughter followed. "The hunter." The group continued laughing. Amaka simply smiled and kept walking. The insults no longer affected her. Later that evening, she told Obinna about the incident. To her surprise, he laughed. "They're right." She frowned. "About what? I am a hunter." Amaka laughed. "You used to own companies. Now I hunt rabbits." She smiled. "You're still the same man." The words warmed his heart. Perhaps that was why he loved her so much. She never measured people by their circumstances, only by their character. Months passed. The seasons slowly changed. The rainy season arrived once again. Heavy storms frequently swept across the village. Roads became muddy. Business slowed. Hunting became more difficult. One particularly rainy week proved especially challenging. For 4 consecutive days, Obinna returned home almost empty-handed. The little money they had saved began disappearing quickly. Eventually, they reached a point where they had to count every coin carefully. One evening, Obinna sat quietly at the table studying their finances. His face was troubled. Amaka noticed immediately. "What is it?" He sighed. "We're running low." She nodded. "I know." Obinna rubbed his forehead. "I hate this." "What?" "Not being able to provide more." Amaka walked over and sat beside him. Then she placed her hand gently over his. "Look at me." He obeyed. "You are providing. Not enough. Enough for us." Obinna looked away. His pride struggled with the situation. Years ago, he had employed hundreds of people. Now he worried about buying food. The contrast was painful. Amaka seemed to understand exactly what he was feeling. "You know something, what I've never cared about your money." He smiled faintly. "I know. I mean it." She squeezed his hand. "The happiest days of my life have happened inside this house." The statement stunned him. Inside this tiny house, this simple life, this humble existence, and yet she genuinely meant every word. At that moment, Obinna realized something important. Happiness and wealth were not the same thing. He had experienced both, and surprisingly, the happiness he felt now seemed deeper. Several weeks later, another challenge arrived. Amaka became sick. First, it seemed minor. A fever, some fatigue, nothing serious. But after several days, she grew weaker. Concern immediately consumed Obinna. The village clinic required money. Medicine required money. Everything required money. Without hesitation, Obinna sold several valuable items he had been saving. Old tools, a radio, even some hunting equipment. Anything necessary. When Amaka discovered what he had done, she became emotional. "You shouldn't have sold those things." Obinna shook his head. "I would sell everything." Tears filled her eyes. "Why?" The answer came instantly. "Because you're my wife." For nearly 2 weeks, Obinna cared for her constantly. He cooked. He cleaned. He fetched water. He stayed beside her whenever she felt weak. The experience reminded Amaka of the countless times she had cared for him. Now their roles were reversed. One evening, after her health finally began improving, she watched him preparing dinner. A smile appeared on her face. "What?" She shook her head. "Nothing. You keep smiling." "I was just thinking." "About what?" Amaka laughed softly. "I married the right man." The words filled him with warmth. Eventually, her health fully returned. Life resumed its normal rhythm, but the experience brought them even closer together. Every challenge they faced seemed to strengthen their marriage. Every difficulty revealed new reasons to appreciate one another. As time passed, something else began changing. Slowly, some villagers started respecting Obina again. Not because he regained his wealth, not because he became successful, but because of how he lived. People noticed his humility, his honesty, his willingness to help others despite his own struggles. One day, a farmer approached him for advice. The next week, another villager asked for help resolving a business dispute. Gradually, people began seeing him differently, not as a failed billionaire, but as a good man. Even so, their financial situation remained difficult. Many nights Obina lay awake, wondering about the future. What if things never improved? What if this was all they would ever have? The questions troubled him. One particular evening, he sat outside staring at the stars. Amaka joined him. "You look serious," he sighed. "Just thinking." "About money," Obina laughed. "How did you know?" "Because that's your worried face." For several moments, silence filled the air. Then Amaka leaned her head against his shoulder. "Do you regret it?" He looked down at her. "Regret what? Marrying me?" The question shocked him. Immediately he turned toward her. "Never." Amaka smiled softly. "Not even once. Not even for a second." He lifted her hand and kissed it gently. "You are the best thing that ever happened to me." Tears appeared in her eyes. The stars shone brightly overhead. The night felt peaceful, comforting. Then Amaka spoke again. "Everything will work out." Obina smiled. "You sound very certain." "I am." How she looked toward the sky. Because life doesn't stay the same forever. Neither of them knew just how true those words would soon become. Far away, thousands of miles beyond their village, events were already unfolding. People were reading about Obina's past achievements. People were studying the story of his rise and fall. People were discussing his leadership skills. Most importantly, people were preparing an opportunity that would change everything. But for now, Obina and Amaka knew nothing about it. They simply sat together beneath the stars outside their small village home. Two people with very little money. Two people facing an uncertain future. Yet somehow they felt rich, because they possessed something far more valuable than wealth. They possessed love. And although neither realized it yet, their greatest blessing was still on its way. Life continued quietly for Obina and Amaka. Months passed after their wedding, and although they still faced financial struggles, they had learned to find joy in simple things. Each morning they woke up together before sunrise. Each evening they shared stories about their day while sitting outside beneath the stars. Their life wasn't luxurious, far from it. The roof of their house still leaked whenever heavy rain fell. Their furniture was old and worn. Some days, money was so tight that they carefully planned every meal. Yet despite all of that, they were happy. The peace inside their home was worth more than anything Obina had owned during his billionaire days. One Monday morning, Obina returned from the forest carrying 2 rabbits and a bush fowl. It wasn't a spectacular hunting day, but it was enough. As he entered the compound, he found Amaka sorting vegetables into baskets. She looked up and smiled. "Welcome back." Obina smiled back. "Businesswoman." Amaka laughed. "Hunter." The playful exchange had become their daily tradition. After setting down his hunting bag, Obina joined her beneath the shade of a mango tree. For several minutes they worked together quietly. Then Amaka suddenly spoke. "You know something, what you haven't checked your email in months." Obina laughed. "That's because I don't have anything important waiting for me." She shrugged. "You never know." The comment seemed harmless. Yet later that day it stayed in his mind. Years earlier, email had been an important part of his life. His inbox had been filled with business proposals, investor meetings, and corporate discussions. After losing everything, he stopped checking it regularly. There seemed little point. Most messages only reminded him of the life he no longer had. Still, Amika's words lingered. Maybe. He should check. Just in case. The following morning, after selling his catch at the market, Obina decided to visit a nearby town. The town was nearly an hour away by motorcycle. There, a small cyber cafe provided internet access. It had been several months since his last visit. As he arrived, the owner immediately recognized him. Obina. The middle-aged man smiled warmly. It's been a long time. Obina laughed. It has. You finally remembered. The internet exists. Something like that. The owner chuckled and pointed toward an available computer. Obina sat down and switched on the machine. The familiar hum of the computer brought back memories. Memories of boardrooms, business meetings, corporate presentations. A completely different life. For a brief moment, nostalgia washed over him. Then he opened his email account. The inbox loaded slowly. Hundreds of unread messages appeared. Most were advertisements. Others were newsletters. A few were old business contacts. Nothing important. At least that was what he thought. Then something caught his attention. One email stood out. The sender's name was unfamiliar. The subject line read "Confidential Employment Opportunity." Obina frowned. Immediately, suspicion entered his mind. Scam. There were countless online scams these days. He almost deleted the message without opening it. Almost. Something stopped him. Perhaps curiosity. Perhaps instinct. Whatever the reason, he clicked. As the email opened, he began reading. The first few lines immediately grabbed his attention. The message came from a major American corporation. The company specialized in international logistics and supply chain management. Obina had heard of them years earlier. They were enormous. One of the largest companies in their industry. His eyebrows rose. Why would such a company contact him? Confused, he continued reading. The email explained that the company's executive recruitment team had been studying business leaders from around the world. During their research, they discovered Obina's story, his rapid rise, his business achievements, his leadership record, his success in building multiple companies. Everything. The email specifically mentioned how impressed they were by what he had accomplished before the collapse of his empire. Obina's heartbeat quickened. This was unexpected. Very unexpected. Then he reached the next paragraph. The company also knew about his downfall, the betrayal by his business partner, the financial scandal, the collapse of his businesses. Most importantly, they knew that investigations eventually proved he had been innocent. Obina stared at the screen. His hands trembled slightly. Someone had taken the time to learn his entire story, not just the success, the failure too. He kept reading. The recruitment team believed that leaders who overcame adversity often develop qualities impossible to teach. Resilience, humility, character, perseverance. According to them, Obina possessed all those qualities. His breathing became shallow. The email continued. They wanted to discuss a senior management position, a position within their American headquarters. For several seconds, Obina simply stared at the screen. His mind struggled to process what he was reading. Felt unreal, impossible. Surely this couldn't be genuine. Perhaps it was still a scam. He reread the email, then read it again and again. Everything looked legitimate. Company logos, official contact information, executive signatures, professional formatting. Nothing appeared suspicious. Still uncertain, he approached the cyber cafe owner. "Can you look at something?" The owner adjusted his glasses. "Of course." Obina showed him the email. The man read quietly. As he reached the end, his eyes widened. Wow. What do you think? The owner looked at him. This doesn't look fake. Obina felt his pulse quicken. You think it's real? The man nodded slowly. It certainly looks real. For several moments, neither spoke. Finally, the owner grinned. My friend, if this is genuine, your life might be about to change. Obina laughed nervously. Let's not get ahead of ourselves. But deep inside, hope was already beginning to grow. Before leaving the cafe, he carefully saved the email and printed a copy. The entire motorcycle ride home felt surreal. His thoughts raced continuously. What if the offer was genuine? What if it wasn't? What if someone was playing a cruel joke? The possibilities spun endlessly through his mind. By the time he reached the village, he felt mentally exhausted. As he entered the compound, Amika immediately noticed something unusual. Her husband looked stunned, almost shocked. She stood quickly. What happened? Obina remained silent. The expression on his face worried her. Obina. Without speaking, he handed her the printed email. Amika took it carefully. Then she began reading. The further she read, the wider her eyes became. By the time she reached the final paragraph, her mouth had fallen open. For several seconds, she simply stared at the paper. Then she looked at him, then back at the paper, then back at him again. Is this real? Obina laughed nervously. I don't know. Amaka sat down slowly. Her hands trembled. They want you to work in America. Apparently. They read about your story. Yes. They know everything. Yes. Silence filled the room. Neither knew what to say. Finally, Amaka smiled. Then she laughed. Then she began crying. Happy tears. Overwhelming tears. The emotional reaction surprised both of them. For months, life had been difficult. For months, they had struggled. For months, they had continued moving forward despite uncertainty. And now, suddenly, a door seemed to be opening. A door neither expected. Obina sat beside her. You shouldn't get excited yet. Amaka wiped her eyes. Why not? Because we don't know if anything will happen. She shook her head firmly. No. What? This means something. Obina smiled. You sound certain. I am. How? Amaka looked directly into his eyes. Because God didn't bring you this far for nothing. The conviction in her voice touched him deeply. That evening, neither could think about anything else. They discussed every possibility, every scenario, every dream. What if the company actually hired him? What if they moved abroad? What would life be like? Would they adapt? Could they succeed? The questions seemed endless. Later that night after dinner, Obina sat outside alone. The stars stretched across the sky above him. The village remained peaceful and quiet. Everything looked exactly the same. Yet somehow everything felt different. For the first time since losing his fortune, a new opportunity had appeared. A genuine opportunity. Not because of luck, not because of connections, but because someone recognized his abilities. Someone saw value in him. The realization filled him with emotion. A few minutes later, Amaka joined him. She sat beside him without speaking. Together they stared at the stars. Then she gently rested her head on his shoulder. You know what I think? Obina smiled. What I think? This is only the beginning. He looked at her. Hope shone brightly in her eyes. For months she had believed in him when nobody else did. Now that belief seemed closer than ever to being rewarded. As the night deepened around them, neither realized that the mysterious email would soon transform their lives forever, because the next message from America would contain something far greater than either of them expected. A message capable of changing their future. A message capable of taking them thousands of miles away from the village. A message capable of proving that sometimes, after losing everything, life gives you a second chance, and that second chance was already on its way. The days following the mysterious email felt unreal for Obina and Amaka. Every morning they woke up wondering whether the opportunity was genuine. Every evening they discussed what might happen next. Yet despite their excitement, both tried to remain cautious. Life had taught them painful lessons about false hope. Obina especially understood disappointment. He had once stood at the top of the business world. He had owned companies worth billions. He had watched his dreams collapse almost overnight. Because of that experience, he refused to celebrate too early. Still deep inside, a small flame of hope continued growing. 3 days after receiving the email, Obina returned to the cyber cafe. The American company had requested a video interview. His heart raced as he read the message. A video interview. This was real. Scammers didn't conduct professional executive interviews. The company had even included details about the interview panel. Senior executives, board members, department directors, everything appeared legitimate. When Obina informed Amaka, she nearly dropped the basket she was carrying. A video interview. He nodded. They want to meet me. Amaka's eyes widened. This is really happening. Obina smiled nervously. Maybe. No. She shook her head firmly. It is. The interview was scheduled for the following week. During those days, Obina prepared extensively. He reviewed business principles, studied industry trends, read articles about international logistics and supply chain management. The preparation reminded him of his former life. For the first time in years, he felt like an executive. Again. Not because of money, not because of status, but because he was once again being challenged professionally. One evening, while reviewing notes inside their small house, Amaka watched him quietly. A smile spread across her face. Wah. She laughed softly. I miss this version of you. Obina looked confused. What version? The businessman. He smiled. I thought that version disappeared. Amaka shook her head. No. She pointed toward his notebook. It was always there. Her words touched him deeply. The following Tuesday finally arrived, the day of the interview. Obina barely slept the night before. By dawn, he was already awake. His stomach churned with nervous energy. Amaka noticed immediately. You look terrified. Obina laughed. I am. You used to speak before investors. That was different. How I wasn't trying to rebuild my life. Amaka walked over and adjusted his shirt collar. Then she smiled. They contacted you. Obina nodded. They chose you. He nodded again. They already know your story. Another nod. Then stop worrying. Her confidence calmed him slightly. Later that morning they traveled together to the cyber cafe. The owner greeted them warmly. When he heard about the interview, he became excited. This is big. Obina smiled nervously. I know. The interview began exactly on time. Several faces appeared on the screen, men and women from different backgrounds, all dressed professionally, all representing the American company. The lead executive smiled. Mr. Obina, thank you for joining us. The conversation began formally. Questions followed, lots of questions. They asked about leadership, business strategy, crisis management, team building, financial recovery, corporate growth. Obina answered calmly, confidently. Honestly, as the interview progressed, something remarkable happened. His nervousness disappeared. The businessman inside him awakened. Years of experience returned naturally. His knowledge remained sharp. His instincts remained strong. The executive seemed impressed. Several nodded while he spoke. Others took notes. One board member asked a question that caught his attention. Mr. Obina, what is the greatest lesson you learned after losing everything? The room became quiet. Obina thought carefully before answering. Then he spoke. I learned that success built only on money is fragile. Several executives nodded. He continued, but success built on character survives anything. The interview panel listened intently. When I lost my companies, I thought I had lost my identity. His voice remained steady. Eventually, I realized I was wrong. The executive smiled. What did you discover? Obina's answer came from the heart. I discovered that character matters more than wealth. The silence that followed felt meaningful. Even through a computer screen, he sensed their respect. The interview lasted nearly 2 hours. When it finally ended, the lead executive smiled warmly. Thank you, Mr. Obina. Thank you. We'll be in touch very soon. The screen went dark. For several seconds, Obina simply sat there. The interview was over. Amaka immediately hugged him. You were amazing. Obina laughed. You don't know that. I do. The cyber cafe owner agreed. I've never seen someone answer questions like that. Still, all they could do now was wait. And waiting proved difficult. The first day passed slowly. The second day felt even longer. By the third day, Obina had almost convinced himself the company had changed its mind. Then the email arrived. Came early in the morning. The subject line contained only a few words. Official employment offer. Obina's heart nearly stopped. His hands trembled as he opened the message. Amaka stood beside him. Neither breathed. The first paragraph immediately delivered the news. The company was offering him the position, a senior executive role, one of the most important positions in their organization. For several seconds, Obina simply stared at the screen. His mind refused to process the information. Then he read the next paragraph. And the next. And the next. Each one seemed more unbelievable than the last. The salary was enormous, far beyond anything they had imagined. The benefits were extraordinary. Health insurance, retirement plans, performance bonuses, relocation assistance, everything. Then came the part that left both of them speechless. The company would provide a fully furnished house, a company vehicle, travel expenses, temporary accommodation upon arrival, even assistance with immigration paperwork. Amaka covered her mouth. Tears immediately filled her eyes. Obina felt completely overwhelmed. The opportunity was far greater than either of them expected. For a long moment, neither spoke. Then Amaka began crying. Not softly, not quietly. She cried openly. Years of struggle seemed to pour out through those tears. Obina pulled her into his arms. Soon tears filled his own eyes as well. For months they had endured hardship. For months they had worried about survival. For months they had trusted that somehow life would improve. Now that improvement stood directly in front of them, the miracle had arrived. That evening they celebrated with the only luxury they could afford, a special homemade meal. As they sat together eating beneath the stars, neither could stop smiling. Several times Amaka reread the offer letter. Each time she reacted exactly the same way. Disbelief, excitement, joy. The following day the news spread throughout the village, and the reactions were immediate. People were stunned, completely stunned. The same villagers who once laughed at Obina now struggled to believe what they were hearing. A company in America hired him. Impossible. No, it's true. They offered him a senior position. Some people refused to believe it. Others became jealous. Many simply stood speechless. The transformation happened almost overnight. Suddenly, the former critics became friendly, very friendly. One afternoon, Obina encountered several men who had mocked him repeatedly. Now they greeted him enthusiastically. My friend. Obina almost laughed. Months earlier, those same men had called him a failure. Now they wanted friendship. The change was almost comical. Meanwhile, several women who once insulted Amaka suddenly praised her. "You're such a good wife. We always knew you were special." Amaka simply smiled politely. She remembered exactly what they had said before. Neither she nor Obina held grudges, but neither forgot. A few days later, the village chief invited them for a meeting. The elderly man welcomed them warmly. "We are proud of you." Obina smiled respectfully. "Thank you." The chief nodded. "Your story teaches an important lesson." "What lesson?" The old man looked around the room. "Never judge people during difficult seasons." Silence followed. Everyone understood the message. Many villagers lowered their eyes. They had mocked Abina when he was struggling. They had mocked Amaka because she was poor. Now life had proven them wrong. 1 week later, official documents began arriving. Contracts, visa paperwork, travel arrangements. Everything moved quickly. The company wanted Abina in America as soon as possible. Each completed document made the opportunity feel more real. One evening, after signing another set of forms, Abina sat quietly outside his house. Amaka joined him. For several minutes, neither spoke. Then Obina looked around the compound. The small house, the familiar trees, the dirt paths, the simple life they had built together. A strange feeling filled his heart. "What are you thinking about?" Amaka asked. He smiled softly. "This place." She nodded. "It changed us." "Yes." Obina looked toward the stars. "When I came back here, I thought my life was over." Amaka reached for his hand, but it wasn't. "No." He smiled. "It was just beginning." As the cool night breeze moved through the village, both sat quietly reflecting on the journey that brought them here: the fall, the heartbreak, the humiliation, the struggle, the love. Every painful moment suddenly seemed connected. Every setback had led them toward this opportunity. And although neither knew exactly what awaited them in America, one thing was certain. Their lives were about to change forever. The poor hunter and the orphan girl would soon leave the village behind. A new chapter was waiting. A chapter filled with possibilities neither could have imagined, and it was closer than ever. The weeks leading to Obina and Amaka's departure passed, faster than either of them expected. After months of hardship and uncertainty, everything suddenly seemed to move at incredible speed. The company handled most of the arrangements. Visa approvals arrived. Flight tickets were issued. Travel documents were finalized. Every completed step made their upcoming journey feel more real. Soon there was no denying it. They were leaving the village. They were leaving Nigeria. They were moving to America. Even now the thought felt unbelievable. One evening, Obinus sat outside his house watching the sunset. The familiar orange glow spread across the sky. Children played in the distance. Women returned home carrying baskets. The sounds of village life filled the air. For years, he had dreamed about escaping failure. Now he was preparing to leave behind the place where he had rebuilt himself. A strange mixture of emotions filled his heart: excitement, gratitude, nervousness, sadness. Amaka joined him on the wooden bench. "You've been quiet lately." Obina smiled. "I'm thinking about America partly." She leaned her head against his shoulder. "What else?" He looked around the compound. "This place." Amaka understood immediately. The village had been the setting of their most difficult, yet it had also given them their greatest blessings. Here they had met. Here they had fallen in love. Here they had built a marriage. Here they had discovered who they truly were. Leaving wasn't easy. Not because they wanted to stay poor, but because they were saying goodbye to an important chapter of their lives. The following morning news spread that their departure date had been confirmed. Within hours, villagers began visiting their house. Some came to congratulate them. Others came out of curiosity. A few came seeking favors. The change in people's behavior remained astonishing. Those who once mocked Obina now praised him openly. One elderly man who had repeatedly laughed at him during his hunting days arrived carrying gifts. "Obina, my son." The sudden affection almost made Obina laugh. The man handed him a basket of fruits. "We are proud of you." Obina accepted the gift graciously. "Thank you." The man hesitated. Then he lowered his eyes. "I owe you an apology." Obina remained silent. Months earlier, such an apology would have meant a great deal. Now it felt unnecessary. Still, he appreciated the sincerity. "I judged you unfairly." The elderly man sighed heavily. "I only saw your failure." Obina smiled gently. "It's all right." "No." The man shook his head. "It wasn't." For a moment, silence filled the room. Then Obina surprised him. "I forgive you." The old man's eyes became emotional. Those simple words seemed to lift a burden from his shoulders. After he left, Amaka smiled. "You really meant that?" Obina nodded. "Of course." She looked impressed. A lot of people would have held a grudge. Obina thought about it carefully. Then he shook his head. "Bitterness only hurts the person carrying it." Amaka smiled proudly. This was one of the many reasons she loved him. His suffering had made him wiser rather than cruel. Days later, the village chief organized a farewell gathering in their honor. The entire village attended, even those who once ridiculed them. A large canopy was erected in the village square. Food was prepared. Traditional music filled the air. As Obina and Amaka arrived, applause greeted them. The reaction felt surreal. Less than 2 years earlier, many of these same people had laughed when Obina sold bush meat in the market. Now they stood and applauded him. Life truly had a strange sense of humor. The village chief rose to speak. His voice carried across the gathering. "Today, we celebrate two people who taught us valuable lessons." The crowd listened attentively. Many of us judged them. Silence spread through the audience. We mocked them. More silence followed. We underestimated them. Several villagers looked down. The chief nodded slowly. But they never responded with hatred. He pointed toward Obina and Amaka. They responded with dignity. The audience applauded loudly. The chief continued. "Their story reminds us that difficult seasons do not last forever." The applause grew louder. As Obina looked around the crowd, he felt no anger, no resentment, only gratitude. Everything that had happened, the good and the bad, had shaped him into the man he had become. That night, after the celebration ended, he and Amaka walked home beneath a sky filled with stars. Neither spoke for several minutes. Then Amaka laughed softly. "What?" She shook her head. "Do you remember when people called us the failed billionaire and the poor orphan?" Obina laughed. "How could I forget? Now look at us." He smiled. "Life changes quickly. Very quickly." They continued walking hand in hand. The future felt closer than ever. Finally, departure day arrived. Before dawn, the village was already awake. People gathered outside their house. Neighbors came to say goodbye. Friends offered prayers. Children waved excitedly. Several elderly women hugged Amaka repeatedly. Many struggled to hold back tears. For someone who grew up as an orphan, the affection touched her deeply. Years earlier, she had believed nobody cared about her. Now an entire community had come to wish her well. As the vehicle arrived to transport them to the airport, emotions ran high. Pau Keke approached Obina. The elderly hunter smiled warmly. "I told you hunting would help." Obina laughed. "It certainly did." The old man nodded, but not in the way either of us expected. Both men laughed. Then Paokeke pulled him into a tight embrace. Make us proud. Obina's eyes became emotional. I'll try. No. The old hunter smiled. I know you will. Soon it was time to leave. As the vehicle pulled away from the village, Obina and Amaka looked through the window. The people they loved became smaller and smaller. Eventually the village disappeared from view. A chapter of their lives had officially ended. Several hours later they arrived at the airport. The experience felt overwhelming. Amaka stared at everything with wide eyes. The crowds, the announcements, the massive airplanes, everything fascinated her. Obina smiled as he watched her excitement. First flight. Amaka laughed nervously. I'm trying not to panic. You'll be fine. What if the plane falls? It won't. How do you know? Obina laughed. I don't. She playfully hit his arm. Their nervous laughter helped ease the tension. Soon they boarded the aircraft. As the plane lifted into the sky, Amaka grabbed Obina's hand tightly. Very tightly. He laughed. Relax. I'm relaxed. You look terrified. I am terrified. Obina couldn't stop smiling. The flight was long, very long, but eventually, after many hours, the captain made an announcement. They were approaching the United States. Both stared through the window. Far below, countless lights stretched across the landscape. The sight was breathtaking. Neither had ever seen anything like it. A mixture of excitement and nervousness filled their hearts. Their new life was about to begin. When the plane finally landed, reality hit them. They had arrived. America, the country they had only seen in movies and television programs. After completing immigration procedures, they entered the arrivals area. Immediately they noticed several people holding signs. One sign displayed Obina's name. A professionally dressed woman smiled and approached them. Mr. Obina. Yes. Welcome. She extended her hand warmly. My name is Sarah. I'm here on behalf of the company. The greeting immediately put them at ease. Sarah introduced them to several other company representatives. Everyone treated them with respect. Genuine respect, not because of Obina's past wealth, but because of the position he had earned. After collecting their luggage, they followed the representatives outside. Then they saw a luxury company vehicle waiting for them. Amaka's eyes widened. Is that for us? Sarah smiled. For now. The words made Amaka laugh. For now, even temporary transportation seemed luxurious compared to their recent life. The drive through the city left them speechless. Towering buildings filled the skyline. Bright lights illuminated the streets. Everything felt enormous, modern, fast. After some time, the vehicle entered a beautiful residential neighborhood. Tree-lined streets stretched in every direction. Large houses stood behind manicured lawns. Finally, the vehicle stopped. Sarah turned toward them. We're here. Obina looked outside. For several seconds, he couldn't speak. Neither could Amaka. The house before them was stunning. Modern architecture beautiful. Landscaping a spacious driveway. Everything looked perfect. Sarah smiled. This will be your home. Amaka's mouth literally fell open. Our home. Yes. The company representative nodded. Fully furnished and ready. Tears instantly filled Amaka's eyes. Obina felt emotional too. Months earlier they had worried about buying food. Now they stood in front of a beautiful home thousands of miles away from the village. The contrast was overwhelming. As they stepped inside, their amazement only grew. The house was beautiful, elegant furniture, modern appliances, spacious rooms. Everything exceeded their expectations. At one point, Amaka simply sat on a sofa and cried. Happy tears, overwhelmed tears. Obina sat beside her. For several moments, neither spoke. Then she looked at him. Is this real? He laughed softly. I think so. She shook her head. I still can't believe it. Neither could, but it was real. Every struggle, every sacrifice, every painful moment had led them here. And although many challenges still awaited them, one thing was certain. Their new beginning had finally arrived. A new country, a new home, a new opportunity, and the next chapter of their lives was only just beginning. The first few months in America were filled with adjustments. Everything felt different. The roads, the weather, the food, the culture, even the way people spoke. For Obina and Amaka, every day brought a new experience. Some moments were exciting, others were challenging. Yet through it all they faced everything together just as they always had. On Obina's first day at work, he woke up before dawn. Old habits never disappeared. As he stood in front of the mirror adjusting his suit, he felt a familiar mixture of excitement and nervousness. Years earlier, preparing for work had been routine. Now, it felt like a second chance, a chance he never expected to receive. Amaka appeared beside him. She smiled proudly. You look good. Obina laughed. I feel nervous. You've managed companies before. This is different. Why? He thought for a moment. Because this time I know how much I could lose. Amaka gently held his hand. You won't lose it. Her confidence made him smile. You always sound certain. Because I believe in you. The words strengthened him immediately. As he left for work, he realized something important. Years earlier, he had faced the business world alone. Now he had someone standing beside him, someone who believed in him completely. The difference was enormous. When Obina arrived at the company's headquarters, he was amazed. The building was massive. Glass walls reflected the morning sunlight. Hundreds of employees moved through the lobby. The atmosphere buzzed with energy and professionalism. Several executives welcomed him warmly. Meetings filled most of the day. Introductions, presentations, strategy sessions, operational reviews. The workload was intense, but something unexpected happened. Obina felt alive again. The challenges energized him. The responsibility motivated him. The opportunity inspired him. Most importantly, he realized he hadn't lost his skills. Not even close. His years of experience remained valuable. His instincts remained sharp. His leadership abilities remained intact. The only difference was that now he possessed something he lacked before: humility. By the end of his first month, company executives were already impressed. His recommendations improved efficiency. His leadership strengthened team morale. His strategic decisions produced measurable results. Word spread quickly throughout the organization. The new executive from Nigeria was exceeding expectations. Meanwhile, Amaka was also adapting to life in America. At first, the transition overwhelmed her. Simple things felt complicated. Public transportation, shopping centers, technology, everything seemed unfamiliar, but Amaka approached every challenge with curiosity and determination. Soon she began taking classes, learning new skills, meeting new people, exploring her new environment. Her confidence grew steadily. Yet, despite the comfort of their new life, neither forgot where they came from. The village remained close to their hearts. Often they spoke about Nigeria. They remembered the mango tree, where they spent countless evenings talking. They remembered their small house. They remembered Pau Keke. They even remembered some of the villagers who mocked them. One evening, several months after arriving in America, Obina and Amaka sat together on the patio behind their new home. The setting sun painted the sky, beautiful shades of orange and gold. For a moment, the view reminded them of the village. Amaka smiled. What are you thinking about? Obina laughed. The market. She looked surprised. The market? Yes. He smiled. The place where we met. Amaka laughed. You were selling rabbits. You bought one. It wasn't a very big rabbit. Obina pretended to be offended. It was a magnificent rabbit. Amaka burst into laughter. The memory still made both of them smile. Sometimes happiness came from remembering how far they had traveled. 1 year passed, then another. The company continued thriving under Obina's leadership. Profits increased significantly. Operations expanded. Several struggling divisions became successful. The board of directors repeatedly praised his work. Soon promotions followed, then bonuses, then stock options. Before long, Obina had rebuilt much of the wealth he lost years earlier. The irony wasn't lost on him. When he desperately wanted success, it had slipped away. When he focused on character, purpose, and relationship, success returned naturally. The lesson remained with him forever. One afternoon, a business magazine requested an interview. The publication wanted to feature his remarkable story. The journalist arrived at his office carrying a notebook filled with questions. After discussing business achievements, the interviewer finally asked the question everyone seemed curious about. How did you recover after losing everything? Obina smiled. The answer came immediately. I didn't recover because of business. The journalist looked surprised. No. Obina shook his head. I recovered because of people. What do you mean? His smile widened. There was a time when I believed money was my greatest asset. The journalist listened carefully. I was wrong. He looked toward a photograph sitting on his desk. A photograph of Amaka. My greatest asset was the person who stayed when everything else disappeared. The interviewer followed his gaze. Understanding immediately appeared on her face. Your wife? Obina nodded. Yes. The article became incredibly popular. People around the world were inspired by his story. The rise, the fall, the betrayal, the love, the comeback. Everything resonated with readers. Soon invitations began arriving. Leadership conferences, business summits, corporate events. Universities wanted him to speak. Young entrepreneurs wanted advice. Investors wanted meetings. Obina accepted some invitations. At each event he shared the same message. Success matters, but character matters more. The lesson came from experience. And because it came from experience, people listened. Several years later, another dream became reality. Obina and Amaka established a charitable foundation. Its mission was simple: support orphan children, provide educational opportunities, help struggling families. The foundation quickly expanded. Schools received support, scholarships were awarded, lives changed. One day, while reviewing reports from the foundation, Amaka became emotional. Tears filled her eyes. Obina noticed immediately. What happened? She pointed toward a photograph. Several orphan children stood smiling outside a newly renovated school. I used to be one of them. Her voice trembled. The memory remained painful, yet it also reminded her how far she had come. Obina wrapped his arm around her shoulders. Together they stared at the photograph. The foundation represented more than charity. It represented healing, purpose, legacy. Years continued passing. Their success grew. Their impact expanded. Eventually they welcomed children into their family. The house that once felt enormous now felt lively and full of laughter. Family dinners became noisy. Weekends became busy. Life became wonderfully chaotic. And through every stage, one thing remained unchanged: their love. The same love that began in a village market. The same love that survived poverty. The same love that survived uncertainty. The same love that crossed an ocean. One summer, nearly 10 years after moving to America, Obina and Amaka decided to visit their village. The trip felt emotional. As their vehicle entered the community, memories flooded back. The roads looked familiar. The houses looked familiar. Even the air felt familiar. Word spread quickly. The village gathered to welcome them. Children ran through the streets. Adults smiled and waved. Many people could hardly believe how much time had passed. Pau Kiki, now much older, greeted them with tears in his eyes. "My children." Obina hugged him tightly. The reunion touched everyone present. Later that evening, Obina and Amaka walked toward the old mango tree, the same tree where they had spent countless evenings talking, the same tree where friendship became love, the same tree that witnessed the beginning of their journey. They sat beneath its branches quietly. The setting sun painted the sky, just as it had years earlier. For a while neither spoke. Then Amaka smiled. "Do you remember everything?" Obina looked around. "This tree changed my life." Amaka laughed softly. "No." He looked at her. "You changed my life." Tears filled her eyes. For a moment neither spoke. The years seemed to disappear. Suddenly they were no longer wealthy professionals living in America. They were simply Obina and Amaka again, a hunter and orphan, two people who found each other when they needed each other most. As darkness slowly settled across the village, Obina reflected on everything that had happened. The rise, the fall, the betrayal, the heartbreak, the struggle, the love, the success. Every chapter mattered. Every challenge served a purpose. If he had never lost everything, he might never have returned to the village. If he had never returned to the village, he might never have met Amaka. And if he had never met Amaka, none of the happiness surrounding him would exist. Finally, he looked at her and smiled. "You know something." "What?" "The day I lost everything felt like the worst day of my life." Amaka listened quietly. Obina took her hand. "But it became the best thing that ever happened to me." A tear rolled down her cheek. She smiled. "I feel the same way." Together they sat beneath the stars, surrounded by memories. The failed billionaire and the poor orphan had built a beautiful life. Not because life was easy, not because success came quickly, but because they never gave up. They never stopped believing. And most importantly, they never stopped loving each other. And so hand in hand they looked toward the future. A future still filled with dreams, still filled with possibilities, still filled with love. And they lived happily ever after. Thanks for watching. If you enjoy the story, please subscribe to this channel.